Alright guys, BLM here, back with a new video, and in this video, I'll be talking about my spoiler-filled thoughts on one of my most anticipated games from the year of 2022, and that is Horizon Forbidden West. Now, obviously this is a sequel to Horizon Zero Dawn, one of my all-time favorite games, and in my eyes, this is a perfect sequel to that game in pretty much every aspect. I think it's a perfect sequel in terms of the gameplay being a steady evolution of the original, while not completely reinventing the wheel in a similar way to many other franchises out there. And the same thing goes for its narrative, where this is a direct continuation off of the previous game in a way that we rarely see in gaming nowadays. I mean, the medium of gaming has been so entrenched in this concept of needing to be accessible to a more casual audience, and because of that we get games like Far Cry and Assassin's Creed, these series that don't have much connective tissue between their entries because they're trying to make each game available for a new audience. And Horizon Forbidden West here just simply does not care. And that is something I truly adore, and it's something that I loved from the older Assassin's Creed games. And this very much feels like the Assassin's Creed Brotherhood to the Assassin's Creed 2. Again, like it progresses the narrative and progresses the gameplay without really caring if people played the first game or not. Now, first here, I do want to talk more about the gameplay, which is obviously very similar to Zero Dawn here, having this massive open world, much bigger than the world of Zero Dawn's, which I very much felt was more contained. However, something I do love about this open world design in this game is that it feels very funneled. Like, it is kind of the best of both worlds, where it still gives you this massive open world, which is something that most people in the modern day expect from games, but also develops it in a way that you can only reach certain areas when the developers want you to. I mean, when you enter the open world, you're not allowed to enter the actual Forbidden West until you complete the embassy quests. Afterwards, you're not able to cross the mountains until you get the base. After that, you have this massive body of water blocking off San Francisco, making it so you're not supposed to reach there until after that main story quest. So again, it is an open world here, but it is designed in a way that still makes it feel personalized to the story that they're trying to tell. It did also make a lot of improvements to traversal, though I will say it's not as much as I personally would have liked. I do still feel like the platforming in this game feels very, very clunky. There are many points in this game where I just fall off a beam that I'm supposed to be able to walk on. There's some jankiness in the traversal that is still there, and I feel like that's kind of underwhelming, but they did add more places that you can climb, though again, not as much as I personally would have liked. Now, I don't want it to be like current Assassin's Creed where you can climb literally anything, but I do still feel like there are a decent amount of points where I'm just running around a mountainside looking for a place to climb, and it just taking forever to eventually find that spot. But through that, we did get the addition of a whole bunch of tools that do help with traversal here. We do get the Polecaster, which does play a major factor into puzzles, and it does also allow you to make some larger jumps, which adds to the variety there. We do also get the Shield Wing and the Sun Wing, which both help with navigating this open world, which does have a high level of elevation to it. And through these things, it does make the overall design of this to be less frustrating, even though the Sun Wings obviously come at the very, very end of the game. But even the Shield Wing, being able to glide down a mountain instead of having to slowly find your way down, is obviously a massive improvement there. They did improve the loot system, where it's reworked with things going to your stash when your pouch is filled, and I did like that aspect of the game, especially considering how much in the first game I just kept on encountering things I just couldn't pick up because I didn't have enough room. The combat system is greatly improved here, with us getting some new weapons like the Spike Thrower, the Shredder Gauntlet, both of which are pretty cool weapons, with the Spike Thrower in particular being kind of overpowered by the end of it. Melee combat has vast improvements here with combos and the Resonator Blast, which added more depth there. You also have the Valor Surges, which are essentially these like finishers slash stat boosts that do, again, add variety to the combat there. We do have a new type of skill tree here that I will be honest, I don't love. I mean, it is more stat based over ability based. And while there are obviously abilities there, that's how you unlock the Valor Surges, and you have certain technique and combos that you can unlock. I do still enjoy more ability-based skill trees personally, as I just never loved things like, oh, upgrade this for 5% extra damage, and like that sort of stuff always felt kind of redundant to me, considering like there's already similar sort of things with upgrading your armor and weapons and all that stuff, but overall, again, not a major complaint. Now let's get into the side content, where this game does obviously have the return of side quests and errands, with side quests obviously being more grand, most of them having more narrative focus around them, and some of these do revolve around the side characters in the game, giving you more insight on them. And again, these were major highlights in the game for me. I mean, it really gave me Mass Effect vibes in them feeling kind of like loyalty missions. And most of the side quests in this game are really high quality, to the same level of main story quests, just obviously not revolving around the central plot. Also in the open world, we do have salvage contracts, which I mean are mostly tedious, but it does end up giving you a pretty strong armor by the end of it. You have the hunting grounds which return, which I've never personally cared for, but again, I get the appeal of them. Melee pits are a similar thing, but for melee combat, and these were terribly constructed in my eyes. I mean, the concept of them are fine. However, I feel like the instructions on how to execute the combos were just not properly given to you, to where like I would do exactly what the instructions tell me to do and I would just fail it, while like other times I would think I messed up but then somehow it completes. So I really hated that aspect of it. We also have the addition of the arena. Again, kind of a just similar thing. Cool side content, destroying machines. I didn't like that you have to pay to do these. That's an aspect that kind of turned me off. But I mean, outside of that, kind of what you would expect. We get the addition of gauntlet runs, which I hate. I don't like these. Like, this just feels very luck-based. This really, really frustrated me towards the end of them, where it's essentially 3 minutes of you doing this Horizon-esque Mario Kart side activity that, again, is terribly constructed, but it's so annoying that almost none of it matters. So really, you're playing like around 3 minutes just to get to the last 30 seconds that actually matter, and at that point, it's very luck-based, where there were numerous times where like I just barely lost a race over and over and over again. I just found it really frustrating. Rebel camps and outposts are also in this game, again, similar to the bandit camps in Zero Dawn, and I mean, they're fine. I mean, they're the most generic side content here, but again, also lead up to a quest that has you working with Aaron to take down the Sons of Prometheus, and that's cool at least. This game also has some mission-based collectibles, like getting black boxes and survey drones and ornaments and vista points, and all these are cool. Like, I really like this aspect of the game. Again, it's something that's so minor, where again, like the drones, like they allow you to change the screens in the control room. Ornaments allow you to change the aesthetic of Las Vegas. And again, it's a lot of minor things like that. But again, I did find these to be cool additions, even though they are obviously very minor. The game does also include Machine Strike, this chess-like game here that is obviously trying to play off of like the Gwent in Witcher 3, or like some of these other mini games made for these open world games, and Machine Strike's fine. I mean, I only play a little bit of it, to be honest. It's really not something I'm super invested in, but again, cool addition for those that do like it. But as for the better side activities, to me, I mean, we do have the addition of Relic Ruins, which are really cool puzzle-based sections here, and mostly taking place within a singular building, and you having to solve puzzles in order to find your way to the ornament, and I thought those were pretty cool. Tall necks were reworked here in a really cool way, to where every single one of them was very unique. I mean, in the original Zero Dawn, I mean, a lot of them were just find a high point, jump onto a tall neck, climb up. But then we saw them reinvent the formula for Frozen Wilds. This game takes that and expands upon it, where every single tall neck feels unique, and that is something I really loved about them here. And the same thing goes for the cauldrons, where again, the typical cauldron gameplay is you having some platforming sections, then some combat sections, then you override the core, then you have a big machine to fight. And like, while some of that is still there with the cauldrons in this game, they do once again like reinvent the formula in a way that is really interesting and makes them all feel really fresh. But there we go. I mean, those are most of my thoughts on the gameplay. Now let's talk about the narrative, which I really adored pretty much everything that they did here. Again, it once again does not hold your hand in the way that most other sequels do nowadays. Like, it expects you to have played Zero Dawn. It expects you to have played the side quests, to know certain characters. It expects you to have read data points to fully grasp the main concepts of the game. Like, it is insane how much of a direct sequel this is and how much investment this pays off in a way that you rarely see from modern games. And again, for me, it does everything I wanted it to do. Expands upon the world building, but also has great character arcs for all of the major characters throughout, with the one minor critique being that certain villains felt a bit flat and felt a bit cartoony. But as a whole, though, I really did love what the narrative did. But with that, let's kind of run through the story, talking about the highlights from beginning to end. Again, to me, we have a fantastic start here. And it's kind of funny because I see so many people in the more general gaming community talk about how it was a slow start, that everything before you get to the open world was really boring. And again, for what I personally want from the gaming medium, this is exactly what I wanted. We get such an incredible opening here. I mean, we start off right away with us learning about what Aloy's character arc is going to be across the game, where we see her instantly push away people and goes off on her own to find a Gaia backup. And again, this plays into her arc across the story of her recognizing that she's not alone. And again, to me, it's really insane that people are really criticizing the way that Aloy is portrayed earlier in the game, and a lot of that to me comes down to people just not recognizing the story that they're trying to tell here. I mean, like, again, it is very clear that this is the arc of Aloy across the story. Again, the reason why she is acting in this way and pushing away people is because she obviously develops over the course of this game, recognizing that that wasn't the correct thing to do, but also it's something that is still earned from the first game. She is someone that learns through that first game how important that she is through her being this clone of Elizabeth Sobek. She gets this misconception that she is the only person that is able to do all of these things. So again, I think it's dumb to criticize the character when that's literally the entire point of the story. We get this intro to the Aloy and Varl relationship, with Varl really coming off as a fantastic character over the course of this game, really given a lot more depth than he had in the original installment. But also, this section sets up the Far Zenith storyline. Again, something that you would not know about had you not read the data points in the first game. And it's insane how major of a storyline they make it here. That again really makes it feel like it's paying off player investment. Afterwards, we do return to Meridian, where again, this was also a very satisfying section for me narratively. Again, to see all of the characters from Horizon Zero Dawn back here. We had like Avad, and we had Murad, and we had all these other like side characters, these characters that showed up in side quests, being characters that are appearing in the main story and that you can talk to and have conversations with here was really fantastic to me. Also, we do end up climbing the spire from the end of the last game, which is also kind of an insane moment. Again, directly continuing off the previous installment. And there we do find out that Silence has stolen Hades and invites Aloy to go to the Forbidden West. But it's after this mission that we get the title card, which is kind of insane considering it took me like almost 2.5 hours to get to this point. But we finally do get to the open world, and obviously we get a lot of more fillery sort of material here. I mean, it is obviously there to teach you about the game, and along the way we do meet characters from, again, the previous game, people like Petra. And we obviously have Aaron, who is still a major character in this game, and we see the beginning of their relationship where it's a bit strained due to her leaving. But here we also get introduced to the tribal dynamics between the Tanakh, where we find out that they have a civil war. And like, I'll be honest, I didn't really care that much about the Tanakh, and really just any tribe in Horizon. I mean, to me, something that like Mass Effect does so masterfully is make me care about all these different races. To me, I felt like that was something that Horizon just didn't do as well. It's where like I never really cared about these individual tribes, and I feel like in this game it's kind of a similar thing. But here we do get the first appearance of Regala, who ends up being kind of a secondary antagonist in the game, but I really just didn't get much from her. Now, obviously, like, she is kind of like the equivalent to like Helis from Zero Dawn, and it was a similar thing in that game. She really just doesn't get that much to do here as an antagonist. But the narrative really starts to pick up once we enter the Forbidden West, where we get the Death's Door quest, which to me is just insane. I mean, here we get a lot of great Aloy and Silence interactions, as he obviously lures us out here. We do finally kill Hades once and for all, and end up working with Silence once again here to enter the Hades Proving Ground, which just felt very nostalgic. We have this hologram with Elizabeth, where again it makes it clear that Elizabeth was also turning away people and was always alone. which again plays into the themes of the narrative here. But eventually we do get to the Gaia backup, and this was such a surreal scene, but also such an incredible one, where we have the reveal of the far zeniths. And again, this could feel very, very jarring if you have not read any of the data points or did not participate in any of the speculation before this game came out of what could be going on here. Now again, as someone that did, I did suspect that this was a possibility, that the far zeniths were going to play a factor here, but to actually see this in actuality was insane. And through this scene, we also get the introduction to Beta, who obviously becomes a major character moving forward, being another clone of Elizabeth Sobek, one that was created by the Far Zeniths. I will also say the Far Zeniths as a whole initially do come off as very cartoony. Again, like Eric and Gerard in particular are not given much depth and really just feel like these generically evil, overpowered figures, but obviously that is recontextualized by the ending. But after our escape, we do end up getting rescued by Varl, to which Aloy sees him as Rost. Once again, playing into the themes of this narrative. And really, I just love the way that they handled Rost across this narrative. Along the way, we do get introduced to Zoe, who is one of the more interesting side characters in this game, her having this relationship with Varl, and her also being kind of one of the more blatant examples in the main story of showing Aloy trying to teach these people about the old ones and trying to catch people up on what she already knows, which again I think also plays into her arc across the story. But through this we get the next couple of quests, the Dying Lands and the Eye of the Earth, which have us trying to find Minerva in order to get Gaia back online. And through this we do get the base, our headquarters for the rest of the story, and I really love this aspect of the game. Again, this very much felt like Mass Effect 2 in the way that you continuously added allies to your group, sent them to your base, and at that point you can have these long conversations with them where you learned about their backgrounds and learned about lore, and all that was fantastic to me. Also, this entire section of the game is just this massive lore dump where we found out more about the Far Zeniths with the signal that awakened Hades coming from the Sirius system, which is where the Odyssey was originally going. And it's also here where we set up what is essentially the bulk of the game, especially the middle portion of the game here, where Gaia's plan is to get back her subordinate functions, with us needing to retrieve Ether, Poseidon, and Demeter to give Gaia enough strength to eventually capture Hephaestus, which will allow us to return the world to normal while also creating a machine army that will be able to destroy the Far Zeniths. And moving forward, we are given 3 main quests that we can do in technically any order, though obviously levels do play a factor here. But the first one involves getting Ether, which largely revolves around the Tanakh storyline, where Ether is underneath the Memorial Grove, specifically under the throne of Hekaru, the leader of the Tanakh. And to be able to get access to it, we need to help the Tanakh in their civil war here. And a lot of this just felt kind of fillery. Like, I was not that interested in what was going on here. I mean, first we have to go and work with Katalo, another one of the new characters here, who is probably the best new side character in this game. One that is this kind of like generic gruff warrior type that does have some humorous moments through his naivety, but also does still come off as this really likable character, especially with his arc around him having lost his arm. This later leads to us defending the Memorial Grove with this really big set piece where we're fighting off against a lot of these big machines with heavy weapons, and a lot of this just kind of reminded me of the Meridian storyline in Zero Dawn. And in a similar way, I wasn't as invested in this as I was with most other storylines in the game. Now, after you complete the first of these quests here, you do end up getting the Cradle of Echoes quest, where Gaia ends up getting a distress signal that leads to us finding Beta in a Far Zenith research lab, where we learn that Beta had escaped the Far Zeniths, and she ends up joining our crew as well. And Beta is also a very fascinating character in this game, one that really fully fits the themes of this narrative with Aloy's connection to Elizabeth Sobek, in the way that Beta and Aloy are radically different, despite the fact that they are both clones of Elizabeth. And seeing their relationship grow over the course of the narrative was a really interesting aspect of it. But also, we do find out that Silence has created a weapon that is able to destroy the Far Zenith's shields, which obviously plays a major factor into the endgame. After this, we do hunt down Poseidon, which leads to us going to Las Vegas, where we do end up meeting Moreland and his friends. And really, this entire quest was fantastic. I mean, while it is very episodic in the way that, like, none of this actually matters outside of just getting Poseidon, I mean, this is an incredible set piece with us going through the underwater ruins of Las Vegas and us eventually having to drain the city. And then at the end, we see the entire city of Las Vegas lit up. And it really is a beautiful moment for this game. Finally, we do end up getting Demeter, which involves us encountering the Quen, which were a really interesting tribe to me. I mean, they were this tribe that worshipped the old ones, but through that had very limited information on them. Obviously, they knew more about them than most other tribes that we've encountered beforehand, but they only have these old focuses that don't give them all of the information. And through that, they end up glorifying figures like Pharaoh, which is a really interesting aspect that they delve into in this game and something that I would love to see further explored in future installments. But through this, we do end up meeting Alva, who is another person that eventually joins our crew, but is also a really likable figure here, and also, just a fascinating one coming from the Quen. But also through her relationship with Aloy, learns the true reality of the old ones, and it's interesting to hear her perspective on that. But with those 3 quests out of the way, we then get into what essentially starts the end game. We now actually have to end up capturing Festus, through which Guy creates a plan of doing so through the Cauldron Gemini, but in order to do so, they need Pharaoh's Omega clearance, the one that he utilized to kill the Zero Dawn members at the end of the previous game. And through that, we need to find Thebes, his old bunker, which was a fascinating aspect of the narrative here. Something that, again, we kind of saw in the trailers, and it did lead to me thinking that this was probably going to happen, but I was so excited to know that this was becoming a reality here. But through this, we obviously get more interactions with the Quen, now seeing the leader of Alva's expedition in Co, this man obsessed with Pharaoh, and through that we end up guiding him through Thebes, which ends up being this really great set piece that gives us insight on Pharaoh's late life, and also has this great mysterious tone as you're walking along, seeing all these data points. Though I will say that I did feel like the Quen's appearance throughout this quest, while I do kind of like it in the sense that, again, we have this misguided group of people going along with us and them finding out the reality of the situation, I didn't love, especially this moment of Co dressing up as Pharaoh and wanting Aloy to dress up as Elizabeth, and that just felt very wacky and what is, outside of that, a very serious narrative. But eventually we do get to the bottom of the bunker, where we do find Pharaoh still alive, now mutated, after having gone through experiments in order to keep himself alive in order to take over the future. And that is insane. I mean, obviously Pharaoh is this massive narcissist that we see through the first game, but I think it's insane that he was alive this entire time. Afterwards, Co ends up killing Pharaoh, which triggers the failsafe, and through that we have this big set piece of escaping the bunker, which is really fun, and we have Co being crushed by Pharaoh's statue, which is kind of generic. And really, this entire quest, doesn't actually end up mattering that much. As much as, again, I loved getting to know more about Pharaoh, this doesn't actually progress the plot that much outside of just Aloy getting the Omega clearance. But obviously, all this other stuff is really cool bonuses to the story here. But then we really kickstart the end of the game, where we have to go to Gemini to capture Hephaestus. But before doing so, we have another talk with Beta, with us having to convince her to go along with our plan. And this is a fantastic scene. I mean, this is really the culmination of their relationship up until this point, with Beta being upset at why she's not like Aloy. And I mean, this is part of the progression of Aloy's character, for realizing that she's not alone, that she had Rost when she was a kid. That altered her development. And that Rost is the difference, not just between her and Beta, but also between her and Elizabeth. And really, I think this progresses Aloy's character to where she doesn't become so hung up on trying to live up to Elizabeth's example as we've seen earlier in the story, Elizabeth herself is this flawed character. So I do think this scene in particular is a very impactful one for Aloy's character here. But after this, again, we go to the Cauldron Gemini. We have some typical Cauldron gameplay. We end up capturing Hephaestus. Beta gives Aloy the Sunwing override, which obviously plays a factor moving forward. But then Far Zenith shows up. And we get the typical low point for the protagonist here, where Beta and Gaia are kidnapped. And we get the big scene here of Varl being killed. And I've seen so much talk online about how this is a pointless death. And I, once again, feel like people aren't looking at this from a narrative perspective. 100%. Varl's death is earned. The entire point of the focus around Varl in this story is for him to die. And that is why Varl shows up at the beginning of the game, and they spend so much time focusing around the relationship between Aloy and Varl. That's why they bring up so many parallels between Varl and Rost, with Varl being this catalyst for Aloy recognizing that she is not alone, with Varl being this person that is continuously trying to make her recognize that she does have people on her side. It's like most of this story is building up to this Varl death in order to fully motivate her character to learn from the mistakes that she has made, while also being a gut-wrenching moment for both Aloy and the players themselves, having bonded with Varl over the course of the narrative. Again, to me, the people that say that this is a pointless death are people that are not truly looking at this narrative for what it is trying to tell from beginning to end. But through this, we do end up getting rescued by Tilda, one of the Far Zeniths, leading to All That Remains, this quest that has us talking with Tilda, which is really weird. We do get this opening section of us walking through her gallery, and she gets to talk about her art. We then have this breakfast with her on the balcony that ends up being this massive lore dump. But again, once again, fully sets up the end of the game where we're gonna work with Tilda in order to take down the Far Zeniths and eventually try to get Sylens on board. Now, along the way, we do get some great moments with us being able to talk to Beta, during which Aloy ends up calling her sister. Again, a great progression of their story. And also, this entire time, it does very much feel like they're setting up Tilda to be the main antagonist here, with, again, Gerard, the person that you're thinking is going to be the main antagonist, being someone that has no development over the course of this story. It feels very clear that Tilda is actually going to be the one that you're facing off against at the end. But beyond this, again, we put the plan in action. But first, we do have a stop at the base. Our first interactions with our companions after Varl's death, during which we end up talking to Zoe, which ends up being a pretty nice scene at first, but then we just randomly get this pregnancy reveal from Zoe, which I just found very jarring. It just feels kind of weirdly put in there and just feels a bit melodramatic. I don't know if they have plans with this storyline in future installments, but in terms of its importance in this story, I did feel it felt kind of ridiculous. But afterwards, we do get the great moment of us using the Sunwing override to, for the first time, fly around the open world, and we do end up joining the battle against Regala, to which we have our final boss with her. But this entire section ends with what is, to me, a very questionable choice, where the developers do give you the choice here of whether or not to kill Regala. And I just don't like this being a thing. Really, choices in this game are very pointless. Now, a lot of them are very inoffensive because all they change is just dialogue, and all the dialogue still fits Aloy's character, so it's fine. But I think when they actually have narrative ramifications, I just don't like it. Where, again, if you kill her, obviously she ends up dying here. While if you keep her alive, she ends up sacrificing herself in the final mission. So, realistically, either way she dies. But I did feel like the latter was a lot more satisfying, both for Aloy's character and also for Regala's character. Where I think having her die here just felt kind of anticlimactic and also felt kind of ruthless from Aloy, who is typically not that within the course of the main story. But through taking down the Tanakh here, we finally get to the final mission in the game, Singularity. We end up leading an assault on the Far Zenith base, which has some great moments throughout it. We started off with some combat and platforming sections with Aaron, which, it's kind of tedious, but mostly inoffensive. We get the reveal of Aloy's plan of releasing Hephaestus to create a machine army to fight against the Spectres, which that's a great moment. We have the Far Zenith showing up, and Sylens using his device that allows us to finally kill them. We have the Eric boss battle. That is pretty standard, but does have Zoe being the one to eventually kill him. Ozzy feeling like payback for Varl. But then we get to the interesting part to me. And I just kind of got giddy when we got to this point, where we get to the final platforming section in the game, heading up to the launch tower. And along the way, Alva talks to us about how she has found out about the Zenith's plan, and that they're actually planning on leaving, not taking over Earth, and that they are afraid of something that they call Nemesis. And eventually, at the top, we do end up saving Beta, and we find out the full ramifications of this situation, where we find out that Nemesis is this AI that the Zeniths created after experimenting with digital transcendence, and that this AI had been abandoned and now resents humanity, and because that is now following the Zeniths to Earth, having been the one that destroyed the Zenith colony in Sirius, and being the one that sent the extinction signal, and that again, the Zeniths are now on the run, having stopped on Earth just to get Gaia to rebuild a new world. But again, this revelation here is insane. Like, it is something that I will say, I know the criticism out there is that this was very abrupt, and I do get that. I do think that this is a very abrupt way to introduce what is essentially the next game. Again, Horizon is something that we've heard that the plan is for it to be a trilogy. It makes sense that this is the setup for the final installment in that trilogy. However, again, not much setup there up until this point. In a situation where I think they could have had like more lines from Tilda or Silence that alluded to this, especially considering their characters knew about this. But I think this is a fascinating way to set up the next game. I am so excited for this next game to see what they do with the storyline. Like, while the concept of this AI having grown consciousness and hates humanity is painfully generic, I do feel like there are so many interesting plot threads that they could do with this. I mean, one, this is something that directly connects into the themes of the entire story, further expanding upon the destruction that humanity can cause, but also what I would assume is going to lead up to humanity working together in order to stop that threat. But also at the same time, I will be mind blown if this does not end up involving Vast Silver, which, if you don't know, again, Vast Silver is another thing that is only in the data points of the original game, where it is this AI that ended up going rogue that is mentioned in these data points. I think this would be a fascinating way to conclude the entire series by having Vast Silver be connected to Nemesis. Now, there's also some speculation that the leader of Far Zenith, whose face we have technically not seen yet, could possibly be Silence, and that Silence is a clone of him, and I think that would be an insane revelation as well. And again, to see like the leaders of Zero Dawn and Far Zenith work together to take down this threat in Vast Silver. I think there are so many insane plot threads that can be utilized here in a future game that, again, this entire storyline is so intriguing to me. But also something I love about this is that it also recontextualizes the Far Zeniths as well, where again, like throughout this game, we see them as this maniacally evil group, this group that is trying to take over the world and start it anew, when in reality, that's not what they're doing here. They're simply stopping on Earth on the run. They are these cowards that are running away. Once again, initially running away from the Pharaoh Plague to start their own society, now running away from Nemesis, the creation of their own doing, with them stopping on Earth just to get Gaia and to escape immediately afterwards. Again, they are these cowards, and I love this recontextualization of the narrative here. It does make them more interesting villains, even though them as individuals outside Tilda don't really get that much development. But back to the ending of the game, we do have the final confrontation with Tilda, where again, Tilda reveals that her plan is to fulfill Elizabeth's dream by leaving Earth and building a new world, but she is going to force Aloy to go with her, which leads to our final boss against her, which felt very gamey, where Tilda ends up going inside of a Spectre Prime, and this felt very like Power Rangers-y. But after her defeat, we do have some final interactions with Silence and Aloy, with Silence revealing his plan was all along to steal the Odyssey from the Far Zeniths, and we see him originally plan to leave until he changes his mind at the last second after seeing Aloy with her friends, and we get what is essentially a very Mass Effect 2 ending, an ending where we have this massive threat now introduced that we know the third game is going to be revolved around, and we end this game with us now spreading the warning that Nemesis is coming, and that we're gonna have to stop it. And again, to me, I felt like this was a satisfying enough ending. I really am intrigued with where this narrative is going moving forward. I really feel like as a whole, this game is, again, a great sequel narratively, where it expands upon the narrative that was told in the previous game, while also fulfilling the themes of its narrative. Again, showing the strength of humanity and showing the progression in Aloy's character, with her now recognizing that she isn't alone, and her also now having this relationship with Beta and Gaia that you can say is like her family. This thing that she had been wanting since the first game. And again, I just feel like there are so many things that this narrative does that really ticked everything I personally wanted from it. And while like certain things could be executed better, I do feel like almost everything here is what I wanted and also goes even beyond that. And there we go. I mean, those are my thoughts on Forbidden West. Again, incredible sequel from Zero Dawn. Again, clearly the second part of this trilogy that I'm very eagerly anticipating the third installment that will probably be in 4 to 5 years. But still, really excited to see it down the road. You can expect me to be talking about this game once again when I talk about my favorite games from 2022, which I am for sure that this will be very high on that list. And obviously just stay tuned for more game reviews, retrospectives, rankings, other videos. But for now, that is the video. Thank you for watching.